Cool. This video is sponsored by The Great Courses Plus. Visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/makeanything to enjoy lectures from top professors from around the world, available streaming on your TV, tablet, laptop, or phone. Hey guys, it's Devin here with Make Anything, and in front of me we have a lot of parts that will hopefully come together to become the tallest twist container that's ever been made. Dustin the Japman and Joel the 3D printing nerd already made some pretty giant twist containers on their massive printers. And I wanted to keep the ball rolling, but I don't have a printer as big as theirs, so I decided to try a different approach. These parts are modular, meaning they can stack on top of each other pretty much infinitely to make a really tall twist container. I'm hoping everything stacks together really well and makes a nice straight container. That way I can have that super satisfying slow twist down as I stick the two halves together. So today we're gonna do that. We're gonna stack all this together and try to make a super tall twist container. And you know what, I'm also gonna try to make the smallest possible twist container. Just because it's fun to try all the extremes, right? Well, I'm super eager to get this working, so let's get right to it. Here you can see me printing the pieces for the outer container on the Flux Delta Plus, and I'm using rigid ink PLA. The walls of these containers are less than 1 millimeter thick, and they printed just great using Flux Studio with the Cura 2 setting for the slicer. These intersections were printed on my BCN Sigma using Florion's eco-friendly plastic. And as you can see, these pieces just slide right together to create a seamless wall. So this inner container is designed so that the outside surface is the smooth one and the connectors are all on the inside, while this outer container has the connectors on the outside so that the inside surface is seamless. That way the surfaces are as smooth as possible where these two containers are sliding past one another. So here I'm testing out a shorter section of this twist container. It's still very tall, but I'm planning on going much taller. Yes. From the looks of this early test, everything's working really well, and that got me super excited. I would like these to twist together a little bit slower, but I'm kind of expecting that to happen as I make the container longer. While these parts do snap together with a pretty tight fit, I decided to use my 3D pen to weld the parts together to make sure that they're really sturdy and stay stuck together. So to keep the outer surface of this container smooth, I went ahead and welded it together from the inside, just creating some small lines that join the seams together, just enough to hold it in place. And I just continued that pattern as the twist container grew, adding one piece at a time and welding them together until I had a twist container that was taller than me. As I was finishing off, I realized that this end cap should have been my starting point since I won't be able to reach the inside to stick them together, but it's strong enough fit that I think it'll be okay. So let's use one of these outer sections and see if this will slide all the way down. Well, I couldn't have asked for it to go much better than that. So I went ahead and started assembling the outer twist container. This one I also fused together with my 3Doodler, but from the outside, since that's the part that's not touching the other container. I just created these little stitches on 3 of the 6 sides, as I figured that's enough to hold it in place. The bond created by fusing parts together like this is pretty strong, so I wasn't too worried. Stacked on top of each other, these containers reach nearly 14 feet tall. I think it's safe to say that's the tallest twist container around. But at this ridiculous height, will the parts still slide together? Let's see. Sure enough, that outer container slid all the way down. Although that inner container did get a bit stuck, so I had to really shake it to get it out. But just look at that, it is a sight to behold. No hands, too. Unfortunately, when I took this outside to get the whole thing in frame, the wind just knocked it over, and it kind of broke into several pieces and cracked at several points as well. So I had to take it inside again and fuse it back together. This time around, the container was too long for me to actually reach inside and fuse it together from the inside, so I had to weld it together from the outside, but I was just really careful to squeeze the plastic in between those cracks to keep that surface as smooth as possible. I actually ended up welding all the seams of every connection on both the inner and outer parts, just to keep the air from escaping from between those seams and hopefully making the whole thing twist down a little bit slower. With that done, I went ahead and gave it another test run, and as you can see, it actually did slow down significantly. But as you can see, it's pretty unstable. So my next step was to create some sort of a base, and I did that by just using this scrap panel of wood and then stapling down this raft from one of the parts that I printed. So with that firmly attached, I'm gonna go ahead and use my 3-doodler with this external battery so that I can use it here outdoors. It just clips on, and I'm gonna go ahead and weld the entire inner container down to this raft. And hopefully that'll make it nice and sturdy and stable. I tested that connection with a sketchy tilt test, and look at that, pretty darn strong. But I still felt like I could do something a little more. Add something special, you know? Like this thing. So this is a melodica, and I wanted to see if I could attach this to the top of the outer container and actually have the container play some music as it was twisting down. It's a crazy idea, but hey, sometimes crazy works. So I went ahead and took my 3-doodler and just melted a hole in the top of that container to match the size of the mouthpiece for my melodica. So I'm not actually extruding any plastic here, I'm just using the heat of the nozzle to melt away this hole. Once I have it the right size, I went ahead and just stuck the melodica on top of there, and that actually fit pretty well. But I think I still need to add some structure to make sure this is sturdy. So I'm gonna wrap some tape around the bottom here, just so that I don't end up damaging my instrument. And then I'm gonna use my 3D pen to create a support structure connecting the melodica to the twist container itself. I went ahead and created this kind of truss support on all sides, and it seems pretty strong. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and tape down one of these keys, and hopefully enough air will be pushed through this instrument to create a sound. Well, there you go. I think I just invented a new and wildly inefficient instrument. Let's go ahead and tape down some more notes and see if we can play a full chord. Now the twist container itself is already really loud, and that's why I have to hold my microphone up so you can actually hear the notes being played. I won't try to argue that it's playing any beautiful music, but hey, it is in fact playing music. After a couple attempts at this, the wind just ripped the containers off of the base. But maybe I could use this in a sort of different way and actually play some notes. Alright, this is ridiculously tiring and sounds pretty terrible, but hey, this is how discoveries are made, right? So, to do a little bit more testing, I ripped this thing off, took off my support structure, and I'm gonna try playing it in a slightly different way by connecting this hose instead and then dropping the container from above. Yeah, still far from amazing, but it was worth a shot. Hold up. I was thinking maybe we should take a minute to talk about what the actual forces are at play with these twist containers. What is causing this super slow and satisfying opening and closing? And why am I able to play music with a twist container? To some, it might seem obvious, but I was actually really interested in the sheer number of different principles that are at play that cause this twist container to work the way it does. In order to better understand what's happening within my own creation, I decided to go ahead and visit the Great Courses Plus for a little bit of a refresher. They have this really awesome 30-hour course called Physics and Our Universe, and I was particularly interested in Lecture 20 about fluid dynamics, which kind of explains some of what's happening here. All of these containers, whether they're giant or tiny, contain air inside of them. And when the container opens, the volume of air inside increases. So air has to get inside. And when it closes, the opposite happens. The air has to get out. So when I close one of these twist containers, the air has to escape mostly through these tiny little spaces in between the two containers. And because that space is so tight, the rate at which the air can exit is limited. That's why we get a nice slow fall. And because those air molecules are occupying that space inside, you can learn some really interesting things. For example, if I close this twist container really quickly, I'm actually compressing the air inside of that container and it's heating up. And when I pull it apart quickly, I'm starting to create a vacuum by increasing the volume quicker than the air can get back in there. And it's kind of stretching out the space that the air molecules can take up. So when I create that tiny hole on the top of the container, all that air occupying that large column has to squeeze through the tiny little hole as well as the other exits, but it's really pushing through that hole, increasing in magnitude, and therefore having the strength to play the melodica. It's pretty cool stuff. On top of being slowed down by the displacement of air, these containers are also slowed down because some of the energy in the container falling down is converted into rotational energy as this thing is twisting. And if you think about it, the container isn't falling straight down. Now it's kind of falling at an angle along the ridges of this twist container. It's like comparing a ball that's falling down a super steep hill really quickly versus a really shallow hill where it's gonna fall down slower. So that's kind of happening here, as well as, of course, friction between the layers of the print. See, there's all kinds of stuff happening. I think I've got that right, mostly. I don't know, I've got to complete that 30-hour course by Professor Wolfson because it's really fascinating, you know. By learning about the way things move and what causes certain motion, you can better manipulate it. And when I'm doing the kinds of stuff that I do, that's really useful information. I might be able to figure out some very interesting ways to create non-intuitive motion from things that I 3D print. If you guys aren't familiar with the Great Courses Plus, it's definitely worth checking out. It is this online, on-demand video subscription service that gives you access to 7,000 videos about all kinds of different things that might interest you. All these courses are taught by very respected people like Ivy League professors or experts from the National Geographic, the Smithsonian, the Culinary Institute. That physics lecture was super helpful, and I'm also really excited to check out the courses on photography and playing guitar, maybe some cooking. If any of this sounds interesting to you, you should definitely visit the Great Courses Plus /MakeAnything or visit the link in the description. You can get a 1-month free trial, so you've got nothing to lose and a lot to learn. Beyond that, courses start for as low as $14.99 a month. Not a bad price for infinite knowledge. Nearly. All right, so now that we've had that little informal physics lesson, let's see if we can make some really tiny twist containers. You know, how is it going to be affected by the fact that there's a lot less air to displace and a lot more friction relative to the size of the whole things? I don't know. Let's try it out. First off, I want to share these pretty tiny containers that were actually made during my visit to Autodesk's Pier 9 Creative Workshop. These were printed on their commercial grade printers. So the tolerances are really good and the layer lines are nearly invisible. Unfortunately, the way these are printed is that they're suspended in a kind of waxy support structure, and I wasn't able to completely get rid of that waxy coating, so that kind of prevented it from really sliding together the way my twist containers are known to do. So I decided to take things into my own hands and try making some even tinier twist containers on my own Replicator 2 3D printer. The first thing I did was swap out the standard 0.4mm nozzle with a smaller 0.2mm nozzle, and that's going to help me create thinner walls and make everything just that much smaller. Then I printed out these really tiny containers using vase mode, which basically means that the entire thing is being printed in a single upward spiral instead of individual layers. And that's gonna help me make the part as seamless as possible. Now, at this small of a scale, even a fraction of a millimeter difference in tolerance is gonna affect the containers. So I actually had to print several of these in hopes of finding two that twisted together really well. And this is the smallest that I was able to come up with. The outer container here is a mere 4.5 millimeters wide, and while they twist together, they still don't really slide together. And I don't think it's a proper twist container unless it actually slides together on its own. So I decided to scale up just a bit, and I created this soft twist container. This works a little bit better, but it's still a little finicky, and I don't think I would necessarily call it satisfying. But after some more experimentation, I was actually able to create a smaller twist container that truly works. At only 8.3 millimeters wide and 10.4 millimeters tall, this thing actually falls down and twists on its own. So I'll go ahead and say this is a proper twist container, and it's properly tiny. Alright guys, well that was a really fun video for me to make. We made some giant twist containers, as well as some really tiny ones. Two projects that are kind of related and yet so vastly different that it's hard for me to show both of them on the same screen. It's always fun to play with extremes, taking a regular object and seeing how big you can make it or how tiny it can get. So if you guys have any ideas of other objects that I can make really big or tiny, let me know, and it might end up in a future video. But that's it for now, so I hope you liked it, and until next time, I'm Devin, this is Make Anything. Don't forget to stay inspired.